All right, so we're going to get into building walls. um, and we're just going to cover the basics on building walls. We're not going to get into all of the settings. We're not going to get into kind of creating your own walls. It's really just how do we create walls using a lot of the default settings in Revit. Um, so that's what we're going to be covering here. Let's go ahead and open up a new file. So we're going to go over to New. I'm going to come into Browse and residential templates. Okay, we'll hit open and I'll hit OK. If you missed this part, check out the previous video where I go into kind of templates and things like that. So let's hit OK. All right. So here's our default settings. I'm going to come up, by default, we're already in the architecture tab. I'm going to click on the icon for walls. Now I'm going to left click on the mouse and it's not going to be the pull down. I'm just going to click on the actual icon. Okay. And what you're going to see is that the property box settings have changed because now it's starting to ask us more information about walls. And this is very common. So you want to get into the habit of doing this. So before we actually build something, and this isn't just walls, it's for a lot of things. Before we actually build anything, we have to answer all these sorts of questions first so that when we actually go build it, Revit knows exactly what it is we want to build. You could always go back and make changes, but the further along you progress with your model, the more cumbersome it is to make those changes, and it begins to affect other elements, things like that. So it's better to just get it right the first time before we move forward. So right up top here, by default, it's set to a basic wall generic 6 inches. So let's go ahead and click inside here. Okay, so it's a left click. And here it gives us a lot of default options of different types of walls. Now, if you use your wheel on the mouse, we can kind of scroll. No, I can't scroll down. So let's scroll up. Okay. And so there's all sorts of settings or walls, 24-inch footing. We have some exterior walls. We have foundational walls. We have just basic generic walls. And then we have some interior walls. And then we have a couple options down here, which we won't really get into. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's click on an exterior wood siding on wood stud. Okay, and because we talked about location lines, this is going to be a good one to kind of explore that a little bit further. So we've selected our wall type. Okay, now the nice thing, and this is really great for those who don't really know much about construction, we can actually go into edit type. Okay, which gives us all sorts of other properties. But what I want to do really quickly, and we're not going to make any changes. I just want to make sure that, or just show you guys that we have the options to do this. We can click on edit, and it'll tell us exactly what this wall is made out of, which is really nice. Especially if you're just learning about construction and you're learning about, or you're just curious, well, how is this wall being constructed, or how are walls constructed? Inside, so here we talked about core, right? So inside our core is the structure, which is a 5.5-inch thickness, which is essentially a 2x6. Okay, so a 2x6 stud, just so you know, 2x6 studs are not actually 2 inches by 6 inches. They're playing down, so they're actually 1.5 by 5.5 inches. Okay, so that means that this wall has a 2x6 core, or 2x6 studs on the inside. On the interior side, notice that right here it says interior side. This is made out of a 1/2-inch gypsum board, which is the same as drywall. Okay, and then on the other side is a 1/2-inch plywood sheathing, has an air infiltration barrier, and clapboard siding, which is 3/4 inches thick. Okay, so it just kind of gives you an insight on what it is, what's inside of this wall. Now, if you are aware of construction, we can actually go in there and make these changes. If you know that, for example, plywood sheathing is really 15-30 seconds, right? Total thickness right here this is the total thickness of the wall. So this changes things. Obviously, 15-30 seconds is the same as 1/2 inch, but if you want to be exact, we can do that. We don't You probably don't want to do that though, just because you don't want your drawings and your dimensions set to a 32nds of an inch. Your contractor will hate you, or they will charge you 3 times as more, right? So, but we do have that option to make changes right inside here, okay? But right now we're just gonna go ahead and leave it as is, okay? And notice as we start coming down, the very first question is, what is the location line, okay? So let me leave it right there for a second and look at the icon, the little kind of pop-up, right? And it actually explains where the locations line are. So we have the wall center line, we have the core center line, we have finish face exterior and interior, and then we have the core face exterior and interior, okay? So I'm going to, let's go ahead and let's explore this a little bit more, just to kind of really finish off and understand location lines. I'm going to make a wall that's 20 feet, and I'm going to set it to the finish face interior, okay? By the way, I'm going to make sure that location, that thin lines is set on, and down here, we're going to set that to fine. So I'm going to click, so it's a left click. So we're just going to click and move the cursor up. Now Revit is a click to start, click to finish software, okay? Oftentimes students get in the habit, people get in the habit of click and drag. So like you click and you hold on to the button, and then you try to move forward and then you let go. Don't do that. So right now is the best time to break that habit if that's your habit, okay? It's not click and drag. You have to click to start. It's just a little tap on the cursor, move the cursor up, and then click to finish, okay? And once we click to finish, Revit is ready to go for the next wall, okay? Now, if we want to finish and we just say, okay, we're done here, we would hit the escape key, okay? And that's going to end the wall, okay? And if we hit, but we're still in the walls setting. So we could go ahead and start creating another one by just clicking on the cursor and clicking to finish. And again, it's ready to go. So we could hit the escape key to finish, right? Now, if we hit the escape key a second time, then it takes us back to the default layout, right? Where we could go ahead and start making more additional changes. So if you ever feel stuck, if you're ever in the middle of a command and you have no idea what you're doing and you just kind of freak out and you want to get back to the original kind of default settings, just keep hitting that escape key and it'll eventually bring you back here, okay? So let's go ahead, create the wall. It remembers our last input, location line, finish face, interior. So let's go ahead and click. What I want to do is look at my cursor, right? Look at the, you see that blue line? That is where my cursor is. So that's showing that it's on the interior side. So if I click and I come down, notice where it's connecting the wall, okay? If we change this, oh, we can't change this right now. So let me hit, so let's go down and click and then hit the escape key. Now, when it comes to, and I'm going to hit it twice, when it comes to corners, Revit will automatically join the two corners once you're done, once you hit enter to finish, okay? Let's do this again, but this time let's change the location line from finish face interior to finish face exterior. We'll hit apply, and you actually don't really have to hit apply. It'll eventually change it. So let's come over here. Sorry, I'm zooming in and zooming out, so you are aware, using the wheel. Okay, so using the wheel on the mouse allows us to zoom in and zoom out. Okay. Now, if I hold down the shift key on the keyboard, and then I click on the right key on the mouse. Okay, so hold down shift and then the right key on the mouse. You see how that arrow, how I get that directional arrow? That allows me to pan. So that kind of allows me to orbit around. So I'm still holding the shift key and I'm still holding the right button on the mouse, and I'm just moving the mouse around, okay? If I don't hold down the shift key, then I just get the options when I right click. Okay, so hold down the shift key and then right click, and that's what you get. Okay, and really quickly, just so we understand placement, right, of where your hands should be, I should have started off with that. I'm right-handed, so for the left-handed people, you would just do the opposite of this. But I have one hand on the cursor at all times, and which is my right hand. I have the left hand on my keyboard at all times. I have the pinky finger on the shift key and my thumb on the space bar. Okay, this is a really good kind of habit to get yourself into, or kind of placement. Every software I've used, the shift key or the control key does something. Actually, both of them will do something. It's some kind of shortcut, and the same with the space bar. Okay, so it's, you want your hand to always, to really quickly toggle between shift and space bar, right? One thing we haven't really talked about is speed and efficiency. Right now, it's just about fundamentals, but eventually, when it comes to any three-dimensional software, time is money. As fast, the faster you're able to create these drawings, the faster you can knock them out and charge more, right? So you want to get into the habit of doing this, and setting yourself up to be the fastest you possibly can, okay? Right now, we're not there yet, but you want to set yourself up. So left hand on the shift key, pinky finger on the shift key, thumb on the space bar, right hand on the mouse. All right, let's get back over here. So now we set this to finish base exterior, so I'm going to do the same thing. Now notice the cursor, right? Notice that now that blue line is on the exterior side, okay? And then I click, and I'm going to come down. Again, it's connected on the exterior side, all right? So now let's hit the escape key to finish. I'm also going to make a setting here, make a change, because sometimes this is difficult for people, especially when you're starting to learn about drawings and floor plan and things like that. We're going to change the visual style here, right? So to the right of the detail level, we're going to click here. So this is just the left click. And we're going to go, by default, it's set to hidden line. So this gives us different kind of options of how we're looking at the model, or the type of line work and the colors and things like that. So let's go to shaded. All right, so now we get some color, and I think that's a bit easier to look at, right? So if we come down here, and if you remember the edit style, and we were looking at the structure, right? And we were talking about the core being 5.5 inches. So here's the core, here's the gypsum board, here's that 1/2 inch sheathing, and then the 3/4 inch plywood, right? So that's what all of these colors are there for. So let's now try, we'll do another wall one last time, and this time we'll go to core face interior. Okay, I'm gonna click, and now again, look at that blue line. That tells us where the cursor, our cursor actually is. So the blue line is on the core face of the interior side. So I'm gonna click down, and we're gonna click again. Now, the question I get asked all the time is, why would you ever dimension or model to the core face? Why would you, who models and dimensions to the studs, right? And this is really the beginning of the difference between architecture and interiors. When we're doing a ground up construction, okay, meaning we're starting from the ground up, the very first people, well, after the foundation is laid out, the next people after the foundation that's laid out that come onto the job site is the framers, the people who are building the wood studs, okay? So if I go to a framer, here, let's go ahead and, if I dimension, right, the first people on the, or the second people on the site are the framers. If I tell my construction guy, sorry, let's go ahead and change this really quickly. If I tell my construction guy, hey, I want a wall that is 6 feet 3 inches from drywall to drywall, that means that the framer, the person who's doing all of the wood framing, is now going to have to take that dimension and then do the math in their head, which is, okay, now I have to do 6 feet 3 minus 5/8 drywall on this side, 5/8 drywall on the other side. That is 1 1/4. So 6'3" minus 1 1/4, that's 6'2 3/4, right? You see how that math happens and it takes people a while. And when you're on a job site, you're moving quickly. And so this is how mistakes happen. Okay. So a lot of people from the ground up actually prefer to dimension to the studs. Because once the studs are up, the people who come next and when they do the drywall, they're not going to look at the dimensions. They're just going to put the drywall up where the stud is, right? So there's no actual, they're not going to, we don't need to actually dimension to 6'3". So when we're building this out, it sometimes is better when we are dimensioning to the studs. Now, when we're talking about interiors and the building's already up, and we're just going to make some minor changes, or if we're just making some changes from the interiors, right? That means that the drywall is already up, and so the contractor is going to measure from the actual drywall. They're not going to measure from the actual stud. So this is an instance where, hey, you know what? I'm doing an interior remodel, and so I just want to model everything to the finished side of the drywall. Right? So this, again, just kind of highlights the importance and why it's so important to set our location lines correctly. Okay. So this also, since we're actually, since we're here, let's just finish off the location lines. So now we understand the location lines. Again, this is 6'3", but if we change the dimensions to, let's say, wall faces, right? We go there, and might as well just kind of cover dimensions really quickly. This is the fastest way. This is the align dimension, okay? But it's also, when we click on wall, actually, no. We also have the option here, but it's a lot easier to click on align dimension here. By clicking on this, the ribbon window, some of the settings in the ribbon window have changed. So if we want to dimension other kind of radiuses, diameters, we want to do different types of dimensions, things like that, you could go ahead and play around with this, but we really need a little bit more kind of curvature. By default, I almost always just use the aligned dimension. Now, when we click on align dimension, again, before we actually do anything, we have to answer a couple questions. So it's asking, well, what do you want me to dimension to? So I'm going to click on this pull down, and do I want to dimension to the center lines? Do I want to dimension to the faces? Do I want to dimension to the center of the core or the faces of the core? Okay. So if we go, let's go faces of the core. So that you'll notice that as I move my cursor, I'm not holding anything down. I'm just moving the cursor over. Different buttons or different lines are being highlighted in blue, right? But you'll notice, well, actually it's picking up. Sometimes it won't pick up the faces right here. It's picking up the face. Sometimes it won't do that. And so it'll give me the opportunity to actually click on the core face. Okay. Now, again, this is why it's really important to make sure that your thin lines is turned on, because if it was turned off, you see how thick those lines are? And now I can't really tell the difference between the line, the finish face and the core face, right? So that's why we want to make sure that, that thin lines is turned on. It's also the reason why we want to make sure that the detail level is set to fine, because if we hit coarse, then that's what we get, right? And again, coarse is set up so that it kind of minimizes the file size, right? This is all stuff that was covered in the previous lecture. So if I click from core face to core face, notice how it gives me a different dimension, right? And so this is an example of what I'm referring to when students or people will create the walls and they think, well, wait, I set it up to 6'4". Why is the dimension giving me 6'3"? Okay, it has to do with the location line of when you built it, and then it has to do with how you're dimensioning. Where are you dimensioning to? So these are small things that create a lot of mistakes for people who are just starting off. Okay, at this point, it's very critical that you completely understand this location line and dimensions. This is why I'm kind of explaining it probably over than what you really need it, but it's very critical that you understand this. So if you still don't understand this, go back, rewatch some of the tutorials, some of the explanations, so that you really get it, because I don't want people moving forward until they feel comfortable and confident with what is the location line, what are the different location lines, why do we need to draw to different domain or what do we have to draw with different location lines, okay? All right, so now that we have that covered, let's go ahead and talk about the walls a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to click on the cursor using the left mouse, and I am dragging. So after I just finished saying that Revit is a click to start, click to finish. When we do multiple selections, when we want to create a cross window, then it is a click, hold the cursor and drag and move the mouse, and then let go once you're done. And that's going to highlight everything. And then I'll just hit the delete key on the keyboard and it goes away. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is create another set of walls. We'll go wall. Let's go ahead and stick to the wood siding. What do we say? Core face. Let's just leave it there. Okay. Now I'm going to click. I'm going to go up. Okay. Now when we go up, in other words, a click to start, right? I have to move the cursor and make sure that it's set vertically, right? Notice how there it tells me it's 90 degrees. Now it's really important that when you let go of the mouse, and this because you have to let go of the mouse to enter dimension, right? This is sometimes very sensitive. So oftentimes people who are just starting off will go up and then move their hand to place the dimension or enter like a 6 feet 3. And when they do that, it'll angle off and people don't pay attention, and then they just enter dimension, and now you have a wall that is slightly angled, and you didn't notice it until it's too late and you're gonna have to go back and delete it, right? So instead, what I want to do is go up, make sure the cursor's up, or the wall is up, and then I'm just going to type in, let's say 6'3". So I'm going to type in the number 6 on the keypad, space 3. Revit automatically understands the foot and inch kind of format. So we don't have to type in 6'3" quotation marks, right? By that space creates that format for us. So just typing 6 space 3, hit enter, and that wall is now 6'3". And we come over here, and let's say we want to go, let's say 15 space 6 space 1/2. Okay? So that's how we enter fraction. So we separate everything with the space bar, right? And there's that space bar. That's why it's important to have your thumb on that space bar. We'll hit enter. Okay. And let's say, I'm probably going to delete this afterwards, but let's say we want to just go 3/4 of an inch up. We would go 0 space 0 space 3\4, enter. Okay. And we went 3/4 of an inch up, but it's so tiny, that's not going to work. So let's hit the escape key. And let's undo that. To undo, and this is going to be your best friend, it's going to be the control key and the letter Z on the keyboard at the same time. So when I press that, you're going to see this go away. And there we go. I actually zoomed out too, but it's gone as well. So if I hit it one more time, control Z, it's going to undo that last wall. Now, if I hit control Y, that's to redo. Okay. Control Z and control Y, these are 2 shortcut commands that are really important, really good for you to memorize, just because they pretty much do the same thing in every software. So every software, control Z, control Y is to undo and redo. So it's just better to memorize that. But you also have these icons up here if you wanted to go and click to undo and redo. Okay. All right, so if I want to add another wall, let's see, my setting is set to core face interior, which is that line. Okay. So let's say I stopped and now I want to continue. I don't want to click over here because that's not the core face interior, right? If I do that, notice where it's setting up that, where it's starting that wall. Okay, so if I want it this way, it gives me that, that's where it's gonna start that wall. So it's better, I'm gonna hit the escape key. It's better to start, right? We have to really zoom in, start exactly where the location line is set. So that's right here. So now I'm gonna click there, okay? And this is going to ensure that my dimensions stay correct. Okay, so maybe up here we'll go, I don't know, let's do 7 feet 5. Sorry, I use multiple softwares, so I often forget that we don't have to do that. So especially with the dimensions, so 7 space 5, enter. Okay, hit the escape key. So I have this set of walls, okay, holding down the shift key and then the right key on the mouse. And I've created a set of walls. Now, again, this is 2-dimensional, right? And this is where it gets a little confusing for people, especially as we progress forward, is that these walls actually exist 3-dimensionally. So let's take a look at that. We're going to go to the project browser, and I'm going to scroll down, okay? And I'm going to look for my north elevation. Let me zoom out here really quickly just so you can see. We do have these little icons, markers, represent our elevations. So we have the north elevation, east elevation, south, and west elevation, right? If I click on the triangle, just a single click, left click, I get this blue line, and this is actually where the elevation is taken from. So in other words, it's as if I'm standing on this blue line, looking in the direction of this triangle. So I'm standing on the blue line, looking down here. If I click on this triangle, it's as if I'm standing on the blue line, looking in that direction, okay? We could also double click on the triangle to take us to the north elevation, but again, it's better to just kind of get in the habit of using the project browser. So I'm going to double click on north, and there is my north elevation. Okay. Now that we're here, let's go ahead and change the detail level, set that to 5, and let's change this to shaded so we get some colors. Okay. Now we have our level lines. Okay. These level lines represent different heights. So by default, when we draw on the first floor, okay, it's going to start our wall up on the first floor. But then we also have our second floor, and then we have our roof level. Okay, so that would mean that our second floor starts 9 feet above first floor, 9 feet above 0, 0. Our roof will begin 18 feet above 0, 0. We could always change this by just double clicking on the number, and let's change this to, let's say, 8 feet. And let's just hit 8, right? We don't even have to do the 0, 0 just because the first number is the foot, okay? Now, when we say this is where the second floor starts, we are referring to the finished material. So that means that the top layer of your floor, so whether it be carpet or tile or wood flooring, right? That top layer where you actually stand is going to be 8 feet above 0, 0. So that means that the actual structure for the floor is going to be below that, okay? This does not mean, this height does not represent your ceiling height from the first floor, okay? So that does not mean that when I'm on the first floor, this is an 8-foot ceiling, because again, 8 foot represents the top layer of that second floor. And so that would mean that the structure is below, so our ceiling height is probably going to be somewhere around 7 feet. So if we move this up to 9 feet, then that almost ensures that our ceiling height is going to be 8 feet once we get there, okay? But if you want to have a higher ceiling height, and let's set that to, let's go big, not charging us anything. So 12 feet. Now, more than likely, you're going to want to change that. Let's go down to 21 feet. Nope. Click 21, enter. And there we have it, right? So we could go ahead and change our level lines and the different heights, okay? Now, down below here, this is really getting into kind of the construction aspect of things. This is we go from 0, 0, and now we start moving down. This is for our foundation. If we end up doing basements, when we do footings, or this is a TO, top of footing, BO, bottom of footing. Okay, let's just go ahead and leave these here just for now. I don't want to go into start, making changes because we're not talking about foundations yet. So let's just stick to everything from finished floor all the way up to roof. Okay. Now, we can select a wall, and when we select, and I just left click on the wall, when I click on the wall, my properties comes back, right? The properties of those walls. So there's that wood siding, core face interior. But we also have these other options, which is base constraint, base offset, top constraint, unconnected. Okay? What this is saying is that this wall is constrained to the first floor, okay? And it has an offset of 0. In other words, an offset meaning that it is offset. It is set a certain distance from this finished floor. So let's just show you that. So let's change this. I'm going to highlight it, and let's change this to, say, 2 feet. I'm just typing 2, and I'll hit enter, and I can hit apply, right? And now you'll notice that it is offset. Now I moved the entire wall up. Okay? Move the entire wall up to 2 feet. Why is this important? When would you ever offset a floor? Well, if we ever have a raised foundation, or if you have stairs, if you're working on a hillside and your first floor wall you have one wall that is hitting the hillside, and we're actually going to construct that maybe 3 feet higher than the rest of the walls because that's where the topography is, right? Whatever reasons, or maybe have stairs going up in certain areas. So we have that option of selecting and offsetting the wall from the finished floor. Okay, this way we keep everything attached to the first floor, but maybe that one wall is different, so we don't have to create a new level line for that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to 0. Let's go ahead and select the wall again. So this wall is constrained to the first floor. So that means that it's constrained to the first floor. So if I wanted to change the first floor, I would, let's say, go 2 feet, right? And every wall, and I hit enter, every wall that was constrained to the first floor, right, because it is constrained to this level line, will automatically move. Now, all of these walls by default are constrained to the base first floor. So that's why they all moved. Let's go ahead and bring this back to 0, enter. Now the top, though, is not constrained, right? You see here how it's unconnected, right? It's set to top constraint unconnected, so that means it's not connected to anything. And it is set at a default height of 20 feet. So if I wanted to set this up and go, you know what, this one wall is a much taller wall, let's go up to 30 feet. Enter or apply. This one wall changed and went up to 30 feet. Okay, and it's not connected to anything. Now let's say we wanted to connect it to the roof. Well, then we'll go inside here, we'll click on the pull down, and it's going to ask me, where do you want the top of this wall to be connected to? So let's click on roof, we'll hit apply, and now you'll notice that it is connected to the roof level, and the unconnected changed, right? And now it's set to the same height as this. So if I ever move this to, say, 25 feet, it'll also move, right? Because it's connected to that. So we can go ahead and select this wall here. I'm going to hold down the control key. Notice that when I hold down the control key, look at my cursor. You see how I get that plus sign when I hold down the control key? Now, if I hold down the shift key, I get the minus sign. So these are shortcuts to select or deselect a wall. So if I want to select this wall, I would click here. I would then press the control key and then click on that one. And then I could also click on that one. Now all 3 walls are selected. If I change my mind, I could hold down the shift key and I can deselect this wall and deselect that wall. So deselected both of them. So I could do that as well. But let's go ahead and just select that one and this one, and let's change the top constraint to, actually, let's change this to second floor. Just see, second floor, right? So now we have one wall that is constrained to the roof level. So if we ever click, so I could also click and drag this, by the way, and it'll automatically adjust. I want to bring this down, it'll automatically adjust these guys because again, they are constrained. Now, just like the first floor base offset, we also have a top offset. So let's say we want to do kind of a parapet around the roof. In other words, the wall continues past the roof line. Well, we can set that, but we also want to attach that the height of that wall to that roof line so that no matter where the roof is, this wall is always going to be 4 feet above that roof line. So let's go ahead and go to top offset, and let's change that to 4 feet and apply. And so now this wall is 4 feet above the roof line, regardless of where or how high I move my roof line, right? So we could do that as well. These are the most common options here, or the settings that everyone really needs to be aware of. So we're gonna leave it at that, okay? But you don't have to make these changes in an elevation view. It actually works out a lot better if we could kind of memorize these settings, right? The constraints, that understanding, and understand that when we're drawing in a floor plan, we're also having to account for the height and what's going on in this, what's going on with that one wall, right? So if you remember, what the base constraint and the top constraints and the offsets do, then we don't have to make these changes in elevation. We could just make these changes as we're building the model. So let's go ahead and do a cross window. Sorry, again, right click on the cursor, holding down on the cursor, and then selecting, letting go of the cursor, and then hitting the delete key. Let's go back to walls. Then we get this button. Sorry, Revit is automatically set up for you to, for it to save or to remind you to save every 30 minutes. I can tell you from experience, the worst feeling is putting in 2, 3, 4 hours worth of work and forgetting to hit the save button. And then something happens and I say, oh, you know what, let me close out really quickly. And all of a sudden I just lost that work. Or the computer shuts down, right? Computer freezes. This has happened to all of us. If it hasn't happened to you yet, it's going to happen. So let's just account for that. So Revit understands that. Revit has experienced that. So it has this automatic reminder to remind you to save a project, okay? Now to save it, we could go ahead and hit save the project. We actually haven't saved anything just yet. So I'm actually going to cancel this, and you can too, since we're really not building anything. We're just kind of playing with things here, playing with walls. So you could hit cancel, but this is a really, really good tool just to remind you to save every 30 minutes, okay? We're gonna go ahead and hit cancel. All right, so we're back to the walls. I'm gonna go ahead and this time let's set the core face to finish face interior. Now when I'm building this one wall, I want the wall to be attached to the first floor. Okay, I don't want an offset, but I'm gonna want this wall to go all the way up to the roof line. And I'm gonna want it to have an offset of 2 feet. So now I could go ahead and start clicking, and I'll say 8 space 6, enter. I'm gonna come out over here to, let's say, I don't know, 16 space 5 space 1/2, enter. And now this wall, actually let's go, this set of walls, I'm going to want it to, actually we have to hit escape to get out. Now I want to build another set of walls. And this set of walls, I actually want it to just go up to the second floor without a top offset. Okay, hit apply. Now our location line is finish face interior, so that's where we're going to pick up. I'm going to zoom in, okay, again, using the wheel on the mouse. That's my finished space interior side. So I'm going to click, and at this point I can zoom back out. And now let's go up 10 space 6 space bar. Oops, sorry, not space bar, enter. And we're going to go 13, just leave it at 13, enter. Okay. Now, if I want to start creating a wall on the second floor, so let's say we go and we say, okay, you know what? I want the base to start at the second floor, or this wall to go at the second floor. I get an error. Okay. And it says error cannot be ignored. Now, oftentimes, I'll be honest with you, oftentimes whenever I get errors with softwares, I ignore them because I just say, well, no, this is what I want to do, right? In Revit, don't ignore them. That's what I've learned over time. Just do not ignore them because it's actually telling you something. Oftentimes we kind of get lost in 2D mode and we forget that, hey, there's things above us and below us that also aren't being shown in Revit. And so it's very difficult sometimes to memorize and remember what's above us, what's below us. And the errors, these Revit errors, kind of remind us and say, hey, you can't do this because X, Y, Z, right? So here, if we read this, it says the top of the wall is lower than the base of the wall. Okay, so the top of the wall, which is set to second floor, is lower than the base of the wall, right? Essentially, they're both set at the same height, so there is no wall to create. So let's cancel. Let's start up over here. By the way, we're setting ourselves up for another error. But now I have the option to model a wall that starts on the second floor and goes up to the roof level. Okay, and we'll do the same thing, that top offset to 2 feet. We'll hit apply. And then now let's go ahead and go again. We'll click. And now you notice that I don't see anything, right? There's nothing to be seen here. I'm not showing any walls, but I'm still getting a dimension. The reason for that is that I'm on the first floor. Okay, and I'm building a wall that is up on the second floor. So there's no way I could see the second floor wall if I'm standing in the first floor. Okay, now I can actually still build it. Okay, so let's go up 10 space 6. Now I'm probably going to get an error sign here. There we go, or warning. So there's two types of notifications. There's that error that was like, nope, you can't do this. And then there's warnings that are like, all right, I'm going to let you do it, but just so you know, dot, dot, dot. None of the created elements are visible in floor plan. We notice that. First floor view, you may want to check the active view, its parameters and visibility settings, as well as any plan regions and their settings. So this is saying, it's just kind of giving you a heads up, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just ignore that, keep going this way, and let's go 13. Let's leave it at 13, enter, and now hit the escape key. Okay, now nothing is here. And that's because it's up on the second floor. So let's go to our elevation. This is where we can actually see this. So we have that first set of walls, right, that were set to the first floor and with that 2 feet offset above the roof. Then we have that second set of walls that we set the top constraint to second floor. And then we have that third set of walls where we drew it and we couldn't see it, right? That goes from the second floor up to the roof and it matches that offset. So again, we can move this up and it restrains and it keeps that same distance. Just so you know, one of the reasons also why we can't see that, or when we're talking about floor plans, when we're talking about floor plans, first floor, second floor, a floor plan is cut 4 feet above your finish line. Okay, so on the second floor, what we see is going to be 4 feet above the second floor. So let's go over to our second floor over here. Okay, and what we see is these lines and these lines, which makes sense because when we go to our elevation, if we imagine what does 4 feet cut through, right? It's cutting through that and it's cutting through that. Now it's also showing us what is below, right? So this is kind of what we call an overlay. It's showing us the first floor below. But when I do a cross window, I can't select it. Okay, so it's just more of a guide to say, hey, this is what's going on below you. Okay? But just keep that in mind that floor plans are cut 4 feet, 4 feet above the finished floor. Okay, so again, just to kind of recap, when we're building walls, we click on walls, we select the wall type that we want. We could always just look into the edit type if we want to learn what in that wall, right? Edit wall, and then go into the structure. But when we go into walls, the first thing is setting our location lines, okay, making sure that that's correct. And then just making sure that our base constraint and our top constraints are also set. Okay, so we know, okay, this wall, we want it to go up to which floor, okay? You're constantly going to be adjusting a lot of these just because you're going to be working with exterior walls and interior walls, and maybe you have a party wall, or maybe the walls have different settings, things like that. So just always keep in mind of what's going on here, okay? So that's it. That's what I'm covering for just the walls themselves.